I'm going to keep up my theme of no PowerPoint. It seems to be working well. So, my name is Matt Mayfield. I'm an engineer by background, and I've moved over to the dark side of the force of sales and marketing because that's actually where the real big messes are. And that's kind of how I formed my career. So, typically I do a lot of sort of prototype selling, first selling, recipe development, sales diagnostic, a lot of sales management, and a lot of sales operations right now. So right now there's sort of a new role that exists in the sales organization. Just out of curiosity, how many are engineers here? Okay, about half. So the Agile movement has created some new positions. It's created the positions of, you used to have an all-seeing, all-knowing project manager. Now you have a team lead, you have an engineering director, you have a product owner, and it's split into 3 roles, and you now are doing agile iterations, and things are really formulaic and compressed, and it does some interesting things. One of the interesting consequences to that is it's made it possible to staff up engineering teams much faster. You take a look at San Francisco and their ability to go from a 5-man startup to a 55-man potential unicorn, billion-dollar unicorn, is really phenomenal. They can do that in a year now. And one of the biggest reasons is Agile allows for really focused tools, really focused skills, and you can actually find these people because they don't need to be superhumans. The same thing's starting to happen in sales. In sales, you have the all-knowing, all-seeing super sales guy that had his set of business cards and relationships and had these magical, warm, personable, emotive skills, and he had a notebook that he could go ahead and just keep everything in his head, and he hopefully just brought business or you fired him. You know, that was life. And these guys were really hard to find. You couldn't tell which ones were bullshitting you. And, you know, it was really hard to scale up. And what you see now, and what you normally did, is the guy who was the alpha dog salesman, you know, the one who slept with more women, drank more beer, and closed more business and everything else. He was the one you made as the top guy, who was a disaster as a manager, right? He didn't have the skills. So now what you tend to do in sales is we're starting to break down sales into different roles. So you start to see hunting and farming is now completely different skill sets and completely different roles. And you start to also have lead generation, not just can you find a customer and will they, and send them, you know, MailChimp spam, but actually engage and talk with customers and look for buying signals to pass over to your hunter. So you now have 3 groups, and in the sales management, you still often have the all-seeing, all-knowing super alpha salesman, and then the second one that you often have is a sales operations manager. So sometimes in my career, I've also acted as that, and the sales operations manager is the one who works about processes, skills, and all the tools that make all this stuff come together. So I thought that's what I would talk a little bit about, is what's happening on the skills and why is this even possible that we can do this. So that if you take a look right now, if you go to, say, some job site in the United States, and especially around Silicon Valley, where I just spent last year in Silicon Valley with one company there, if you take a look at the predominant area for job hiring in sales, it is not field sales reps. It is not sales manager. It is inside sales managers and sales development reps, SDRs. This is the 2 hottest areas. And you'll see this, an SDR, sales development reps, this all comes from Ross's book, Predictable Revenue. What's his first name, Alan? Aaron Ross. Predictable Revenue. And it's just that movement is now every company. And it's all about breaking that down. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to talk about that in the context of how you might do business. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of the sophisticated tools and what's coming down as well. But I thought I'd just start sort of in the beginning. In the beginning, there was a guy in Oracle named Tom Siebel, And Tom Siebel said, wouldn't it be great if we made a database product for salesmen? And Larry Ellison wasn't too impressed. Tom Siebel went off on his own, and Larry Ellison had to buy the company back for a couple $2 billion. And that company's name was Siebel. And Siebel basically defined the data structure of all CRMs. Again, how many people use a CRM? Okay, almost none. Good. So, well, I mean, not good, but at least it's consistent. So, consistently bad, but consistent. That's easier to work with. So, Tom Siebel said, let there be an account. An account is what you call a company. But it can also be, it's the lowest atomic unit for making a decision. So it could be a division of a company, it could be a location of a company. It is the lowest atomic unit for independent decision making. So if we wanted to sell to Accenture, Accenture is not one company. There's almost nothing that all of Accenture globally can agree on, right? So you would talk about Accenture Vienna or Accenture Milan. And then from that, we have a series of contacts. Contacts are people. Every CRM system in the world pretty much follows this schema that I'm explaining right here. So contacts are connected to accounts. You have multiple contacts. And then what we typically do is we have opportunities. Opportunities are deals we can win or lose. So we're going to submit an offer to a customer and we want him to either buy it or not buy it. So we can have a series of opportunities that we can win or lose with the customer. Now we also have the concept of tasks, which are things like notes we put in there, emails, phone call records, anything like that. Reminders to go do something, and they can be connected to accounts, and can be connected to opportunities, and can be connected to people. And this is basically what a CRM does. It's more or less a database that has this type of structure that you're going to capture all your information. So you're going to have information about the companies, information about the people who work in those companies, and the deals that you're hoping to win or lose. Right, you're hoping to win them all, but whether you've won or lost them. And then lots and lots of communication and tasks associated with that. This is how Tom Siebel did it in, 2002 or whenever he started. And more or less, this has been the standard. Very few people deviate from this. What you'll often see is sometimes people try and be really clever, and they use the word companies here. And they might be clever and try and call this deals. And they might call this something like events, activities, communications. So they might rename it, but it's all the exact same thing. And it's all going back to this, they sometimes will call this people. And we're all talking about the same thing. So I'm always going to use pretty much what is now the de facto standard, which is Salesforce.com. This is an account, this is a contact, this is an opportunity, and this is actually an event. No, sorry, this is an activity. So that's the main things that are there. You have one other data structure just from storing information, which is you have the concept of a lead. And in a CRM context, a lead is basically a cut down version of the contact, an opportunity, and an account. And why would you use that? The basic idea here is a lead has a limited life. Contacts and accounts and opportunities, you're building information over a long period of time, and layer upon layer upon layer, you really start to understand what's going on at a particular company. So the company I was with in San Francisco last year, we were trying to sell to Slack. We'd actually been tracking one of the founders back when Slack used to be a game company, and Slack was their internal tool for the engineers to talk to each other. So we had information about what he was using before, why he didn't buy from us before. We had his email, we could remind him that we already talked to him. And just getting above the noise when your Slack is now a unicorn, I think they're worth over $1 billion in the latest valuation, is massively valuable. So one of the key things you're doing with a CRM system is you're building information that you can use over time. A lead is basically a cut down version of what the contact, the opportunity, and the account is, so that you can do it faster and easier. But the big difference is a lead has a temporary life. You basically convert it into the following, or you kill it. So why would you want to do that? Let's say that you're at an event in Nuremberg and you're flashing badges and beeping them, and you end up with all these different people. For those, you're going to do follow-ups. Lots of them are going to be absolutely nothings. You don't really care about maintaining that. That's a lead list. And then you go ahead and promote what it is. If instead you're selling to insurance companies in Slovenia, there's only 20. Every single person, every single account gets done in the main structure, because every single communication is going to be key and valuable moving forward. Okay, one of the biggest problems was Siebel. So Siebel, you guys probably never even heard of anymore, yet it was the absolute dominant one and worth several $1 billion. Siebel had a pretty major problem. They would charge about $2,500 a seat. You would need another $5,000 a seat worth of integration work. It would take a year to implement. Saab famously spent 17 million euros trying to launch their Siebel system, flushed it down the toilet and started again after spending that much money. Siebel had this massive problem that they had about a 90+% fail to adopt. Now, what's the difference between an accounting software system, an ERP, and a CRM? Single biggest difference is salesmen can sell without a CRM. Accountants can't do anything without an ERP, right? So when you bring them a new ERP, they will use it because they have no choice. If you're on the manufacturing floor and you're doing inventory, if you're in purchasing, you have to use the system. You have to figure out how to make it work, remove the bugs, and use it. If you're a salesman and you bring in a CRM system, what happens if you don't use it? Well, you ultimately might get fired, but so long as you're bringing in business, you're not going to be fired. No salesman ever got fired for just not using a CRM. They got fired for not using a CRM and not bringing in business. Likewise, nobody ever saved their job by using a CRM perfectly. So, using the CRM and following the directions buys you a bit more time, but it didn't fundamentally change your life. So CRMs have this massive problem of fail to adopt. Just out of curiosity, we have a small number of CRM users. How many people have started a CRM and then shut it down because it wasn't working? About the same number. Okay, nothing new. I can tell you my time at Hermes Soft Lab, when I was head of sales, we went through 4. And now, as I understand, they went through 2 more after I left. Somewhere around €500,000 was spent on CRM there through the years. It's hard to do. It's really fundamentally hard. But that's changed. It's now much, much easier. The biggest problem with Siebel was, Siebel looked at the problem with a data structure and sold to management. What does management want? Management wants forecasts. Forecasting is what kills your CRM. Trying to predict your revenue, you end up with a needlessly, wildly complex tool. Now, I know you worked at IBM. IBM is famous for using Siebel only for forecasting. It was a stupid, expensive, wildly complex tool. I don't know, they might still be doing it today. No, they stopped finally. They stopped them. I know they did it for years and years and years. And it's an awful tool to do CRM and to do forecasting. Forecasting is a consequence of having good data in your system. If you have good data in your system, you then can start coming up with ideas of how you might be able to forecast. So nobody gets forecasting in the first 6 months or a year of implementing a CRM. Don't even try. As a matter of fact, if you try, you will screw it up. Because the whole key is you have to make value for the salespeople. It has to be useful for them before they'll put in the data. And if they don't put in the data, it's not useful for anybody. It's just a mess. So the next sort of major milestone that happened was Salesforce.com. You guys heard of Salesforce.com? They're kind of the big gorilla, especially at the moment. They started out as not doing much more than a contact management system, just basically contact cards and just a master contact card list for people and a little bit of communications. But it was helpful to salespeople, and it was easy to use, and that changed everything. Because now suddenly the salesmen were already using Salesforce.com, and the next thing people wanted was, how do I do forecasting? Did it the other way around, wildly more successful. They were the first of what's now called SaaS, software as a service. They're really the darlings. The first one to go public, the first one to make over $1 billion, changed everything. They are now the dominant player. In the sales world, they talk about system of records. System of records like accounting software. Your ERP is your system of record for finances. Your system of record for sales in lots and lots of companies is Salesforce. It is not the best product. It is not the easiest to use. But the fact is, everybody supports it. Everybody uses it. You know, if you're hiring salespeople in the United States that cost $250,000 a year, 2 out of 3 of them will have used Salesforce at their previous job. It's just a skill they come with now. So this is what's happened with Salesforce. It's the de facto standard, much like Microsoft Windows has been the de facto standard for so long. So I want to talk about what do you need to do to get a CRM off the ground. You know, the key is getting it adopted, getting people using it. So one of the ironies is we were talking about this. D.labs was not using a CRM until about 6 weeks ago. So they were guilty of all of this. They failed to do an adoption about a year ago, and they asked me to actually come in and help get the CRM off the ground. So I want to just sort of talk about some of the basics of what you need to do to get your CRM so it actually does work. So one of the first things you have to do in thinking about a CRM, and actually even choosing which CRM in some cases, you have to decide whether your world revolves around the account, which we said is basically the company, or whether it focuses around the deal, the opportunity. Now why is that? What's the difference? Didn't we say opportunities connect into deals? There's really 2 ways you can run your business. So I can think about, Hermes Soft Lab, we thought about business in the Adriatic as deals. You won a tender or you didn't win a tender. Life was binary. It didn't, just because you won one tender with a group didn't mean that you were going to win another tender. But in the area where we did software development outsourcing for companies in the West, well, there we thought about it as an account, as at the company level, because the fact that we got 2 guys in the door most likely meant that we would have more than 10 people in the door 6 months later. And that meant we would have, on average, 2 or 3 million euro worth of revenue per customer, even though it only started with getting 2 people in the door for 1 month. So it's a different way of thinking about how your count is. And what you see a lot now is LTCV, lifetime customer value. This is, you see subscription businesses are really popular right now. And one of the reasons why they're so popular is because you have really high lifetime customer value, and only one time do you actually need to sell. So here in Slovenia, Biznode, who does Ibon and Boniteta, right, they're doing exactly this. They have what they call a development team, which is calling new customers. They have a bunch of students in these rooms, 15 to a room, and they're pounding on the phone, hoping to close 1 deal a day. To get, what are they going to get, 20 euros, 25 euros from you per month? How does that make sense? How does the math work? And the math works because they have another room over there which has 3 people in it. And that 3 people is able to maintain 90+% of the previous year, actually over 100% of the previous year's revenue. They lose a couple customers, but then they upsell a couple customers. But they're the easiest customers in the world because they're existing customers. So they have these 3 awesome geniuses in this room who call up every existing customer and basically get them to renew and potentially upsell. And the company basically grows every single year because of this system. So they can overspend to get the new customers because they're going to underspend when they need to renew the customers. If you took a look at, say, something like accounting software, basically you could lose money selling every single license because the maintenance fees at the back end are going to recover those costs. And you know, for accounting software, nobody changes accounting software, right? So they're going to just go to their grave before they change it out. They'll keep paying those maintenance fees because the government's always changing something. So you have to decide whether your company is basically account-driven or opportunity-driven. Now, this is a really important decision. Most salespeople just think about closing deals. When you ask them to draw and think about their business, they talk about the various deals they want to close, because they basically wake up every morning and say, I've got these deals I need to close. How these deals connect into a larger account, they often don't think about. They're thinking very tactically and very short term. And that's fine if that's how the nature of your business is. So if your business is relatively transactional, that it's not that much easier to get a repeat customer, then you want to think about this as opportunity driven. If, on the other hand, the first deal is just the start of a longer term relationship, which is going to generate a lot more business, then you want to think about more about an account-based CRM system. So something like Siebel, you can set it up either way. And where it changes is, remember I talked about account, contact, and opportunity. Where are you storing all the messages and all the communications? So all the emails with the people, are you storing it here or are you storing it here? Where is all the key information about the importance of the customer or the importance of the deal? How much you should be spending, how much energy you should put into this? Is it here or is it here? So as you start to customize and set it up, this is one of the most critical things you have to figure out. Are you account-centric or are you deal-centric? Some CRMs you can go both ways. Lots of others are going to be one way or the other. So the second thing you should be thinking about as you do this, you typically have percentages as you go through sales stages. So we typically have sales stages. So let's say that we are doing, what's our business? We're going to sell coffee to businesses, to various offices. We're going to sell the coffee machine and the coffee resupply. Now we have various stages, right? So I need them to basically try the machine. I need them to make the first order. I need them to make a standing order. Maybe sign a contract. Long term. Something like this. This might be sort of an account-centric, how I might look at this particular account. I can have stages of a deal. I can also, if I want to just talk about it as the deal, I could have stages, something with that. So I could do something like first visit. I could have something like taste. I could have sent offer. I could have verbal yes. So these could be my stages. So every CRM is you're going to have a series of stages that the deal needs to go through. And every company has a different set of stages of what you need to do. I'll talk a little bit about stages later. But typically these are then associated with a percentage. Or in some CRMs, you're going to put down the percentage and say, what's my percentage of the deal? And you need to kind of decide one of the two things. Am I trying to indicate the percentage of how much of the sales process is finished? Or am I trying to say, is this the percentage probability that I'm going to win the deal? So if it's this particular case, by the time I've got to here, I've done 60% of the deal. I've done 60% of the work. But I probably only have a 15% chance that I've won it. So typically, again, if you're trying to stay away from forecasting, you're probably going to be better off just thinking about this one, thinking about effort, amount of effort you're going to go. And actually, I'll go ahead and hit what this is. Let's talk about stages. You also need to design your stages appropriately. Your stages should represent selling milestones, so accomplishments in the sales process. So sent offer, is that an accomplishment? No, any idiot can send an offer, and you can send it at any time. That's not an accomplishment. Getting them to taste your coffee, is that an accomplishment? I would argue that is, right? I actually had to physically get them to somebody to taste it. But I probably am missing a couple steps here, which is, did I get the boss to taste it? Did I establish their price? I mean, I don't know that. What do you have for me? Oh, here. Did I establish a budget? Maybe did I discover who the competition is? Right? These are all accomplishments during the deal closing. So, first visit, discover the competition. That's something that's auditable. It's also something that's important in the sales process. I need to know who we're selling against if I can figure out how we need to win the deal. I need somebody to taste it, the boss to taste it. That means you have access to the boss, you've talked to him, and he's at least aware that you exist, and hopefully has a good opinion. Budget. Who controls the money, right? If we talk about large, complex business-to-business deals, there's somebody who controls, who thinks about unrelated value for money, the financial buyer, and we have a user buyer, somebody who's going to taste it, and we can have people that worry about details, budgets. So this would be sort of typical things in terms of stages. You want to think about what is difficult, auditable. I mean, you can actually take a look at the emails and see that they did it, and represents a milestone, not something. So presentations, gave a presentation, gave a demo. These are horrible. Sent an offer, sent the contract. These are horrible ones. You want to pick things like identified the decision makers, made contact with the decision makers, won over the decision makers, got a verbal commitment. They budgeted us into next year. These are all harder, more serious milestones. So, the other thing you have to decide on a CRM system is what email is the main way we communicate now. I mean, a little bit less in Slovenia, there's still some phone being used here, but email tends to be the main language of business selling. So you can, in a CRM system, you can do one of two ways. One is you can track the emails going in and out. And the other way you could do it is just track the emails going out. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, it changes how you think about doing stuff. So if you do just the outbound emails, one of the challenges you have is you have to train the sales guys to do what they should be doing anyway, which is every time they get an email to tell the customer, I have your email. Thanks for the email, I'll get you a response Monday. And that way it gets into the system. It gets much more complex if you're going to try and get the inbound and the outbound. And you're also going to fill your message. It's going to get much harder to go find a particular message because everything's going to be repeated so many more times. So typically, you're only doing outbound. But there's some real advantages to doing both inbound and outbound simultaneously. And one of the things, the way these normally work is you just basically on the BCC of your email, you have some crazy email address that goes to your CRM vendor. And based on that, they take a look at the email and say, oh, who are you sending it to? They take a look at that email address, find the contact that that belongs with, and then they can go ahead and associate it with that person and the company that they belong to. And if it's an opportunity, they can say, oh, what people are associated with that opportunity, and what's the most recent opportunity, and where should I stuff that in? So that's what happens, though, is the sales guys often are a little sloppy and didn't do the BCC, and you end up losing data, losing a lot of information. Or they didn't create the contact card, and then you lose a lot of information. So this is one of the key things to figure out what you want to do. You also end up with some nasty things around here. Some of the companies say, oh, I know how to solve that. We're going to integrate with Gmail, and we'll just collect it both ways. And oh, we'll auto-create accounts and we'll auto-create contacts. And you end up with just massive pollution of the database. Yeah. So start simple, start clean. That's really the key to a CRM implementation. Do a minimum amount of custom fields, keep them simple, try and keep all the data updated as you go. Try and start with as clean a starting point as possible, because value to the users is when they can believe the data. And that's when they take the care to put good data back in. So it's, you know, if the kitchen, if it starts out clean, everybody else will keep it clean. As soon as it gets dirty, everybody just gives up and it becomes a complete mess. So, yeah. So different roles on a CRM. This is one of the things to think about. Usually you think about your couple sales guys. One of the real powers of using a CRM system is that you can involve more people into the deal, right? So financial contracts people can go ahead and look into the CRM and see what the history was for the negotiation, and then take a look at the contract that you've been sending, that the customer sent you. You can start to have things like technical sales support people. Your manager can come in so that if it's time to go ahead and set up a meeting with the boss. So you can do a lot of these things when you have a CRM system and you have a central point where all the information is. So what that means is there's likely to be far more users than you originally thought. And that these users are going to have very different roles in what they're going to do. So, lead generation, hunting, farming, management, marketing, pre-sales. This is typically what happens. So you originally think you need 5 licenses and you need 9. Yeah, and so the real value of this is, in a world where there's usually multiple decision makers on the other side. Right now, I think the latest research is that most large consultative deals, so complex consultative business-to-business deals, there's 4.3 decision makers on the other side. So the way you handle 4.3 decision makers is by bringing in more than just one salesman to go deal with them. You bring in multiple people who can handle them differently. You bring in dance partners and you orchestrate a big team dance. And CRM systems are fantastic for orchestrating the team dance. If you don't have a CRM system, it's a nightmare to try and do that. So, I thought I'd talk a little bit about, I promised I would talk a couple about CRM systems. There's probably, I was recently doing some evaluation for a CRM system. I spent about a month or so looking at different ones. There's probably well over 100 that exist in the marketplace. And so there's far more that I don't know of, but I thought I'd just sort of hit a couple of them. One was interesting, Zamanta was what I was doing all the research for. What we ultimately decided was Salesforce. And the reason we chose Salesforce is because basically with Salesforce, it's only a question of money. You can do anything you want to do as long as you're willing to spend the money to go make it happen. Every customization, every plugin, everything can happen in Salesforce. It's just a question of spending the money. And given that you're spending a lot of money on high-end sales guys and on supporting them, it didn't, the only reason to go with something else was to save money, and that didn't make sense. Another one I really like a lot is Pipedrive. So Pipedrive is actually what d.labs is using. That was my recommendation for d.labs. So Pipedrive is really low cost. It's the best in terms of not really seeing the data structure behind it. You know, they merge companies and contacts as one thing as you look at it. It took me a while to even figure out how they were doing it. And they do it in a Kanban style. You ever use Trello? Yes. Okay, so if you use Trello, that's Kanban. It's a Japanese technique for priority. And they have multiple pipelines, and it's stupid cheap. It's well executed. It's one of my favorites. Is Pipedrive. I think it's about $20 a month per seat, so really inexpensive. Couple other ones that are sort of worth mentioning. Close.io. Close.io is probably my favorite if you're doing lots of lead generation, SDR type lead generation. You're firing off lots and lots of communication to a lot of people. That's a fairly new one. And it goes under a category, there's a lot of products, especially around SDR, where you get these startups that have sort of semi-cooked products. You know, they got lots of bugs in them, lots of features missing. They're constantly coming out with something that's going to come out next quarter. They have fairly high prices, and you know, you just need to live with them. They're just not fully cooked, but they often can have really powerful benefits. So right now I'm using with Samantha something called SalesLoft that definitely fits that category. It's for SDR, sales development rep, lead generation. It's $100 a seat per month. It's so full of bugs. It's so lacking features. It's massively in, you know, version 0.7 beta, but it's wildly valuable as is. So happy to spend the money and make that work. I'll do a couple other ones. Base.io is another favorite that's kind of in the startup-y world. It's kind of a bit more than, say, a Close.io. It's pretty expensive also. One of the things I didn't like a lot about a lot of these CRMs is when you start to do custom fields. Every business has different attributes to your business. So you need custom fields for everything that you're going to store. So who is your ideal customer is a very critical thing. You need to basically break down your ideal customer into a series of fields. You know, it's a customer that has this many employees, that's in this geography, that has this industry, that has this, this management structure, or this financial situation, or this ownership structure. These are not going to be standard fields in every single CRM. So you're going to create custom fields. And what you find is a lot of these, the custom fields, for example, you can't do formulas. So you can't say, if this field is this, and this field is this, and this field is this, then this is a great one, or otherwise it's junk and avoid it. Instead, you have to do a manual field. So Pipedrive does not allow you to do formulas. Base.io, Close.io, Base CRM, Close.io, all of these are going to be very limiting here. Things like Zoho, if you're an engineer and kind of a nerd, it's halfway to Salesforce, but the big problem is it's not Salesforce. So all these plugins, all these tools aren't going to work with it. So that's the big negative with that. Otherwise, it's a fairly high-functioning CRM. Microsoft, same problem. You've got lots of customization, lots of things. Just nobody supports Microsoft CRM, at least not the modern plugins and modern tools. Insightly, I don't know much about it. Microsoft, Salesforce just bought them. It's more of a front-end tool. And one that I'm going to use for my wife's one-man band harp rental business is Streak.com. I just stumbled into this. It's a free Google plugin. And I think I'm going to use it for my own one-man band company as well. So this is quite interesting, but I can't say for sure on that because I haven't actually test drove it yet. So that's at the very low end, and it's free. So at the very low end is Streak. Pipedrive is my €20 a seat favorite. You know, how can you not afford €20 a month? And the Salesforce is the standard. If you're going to blow the money, that's what it is. But just know it's expensive, and they're going to keep coming back after you for all kinds of stuff. Dashboards and meetings. This is another critical component. You make a CRM, it's going to collect all this data. What are you going to do with the data? It needs to be something constructive and helpful. So one of the things that I tend to do is, especially if I get new salespeople, or we're going into a new market, or we're following a new sales process, or it's a new product, focus on activity. So one of the things, like for example with Samantha or even d.labs, how many emails did each salesman send out last week? How many of those were for customers, for existing customers? How many of those were for people that's in the sales funnel? How many of them were other, which means prospecting to try and find new leads and new customers? And what I'm looking for is a nice balance. I'm looking for a good threshold volume. So Samantha, I want 50 a week. I want 50 emails, and I want roughly a third to be prospecting and no more than 2/3 to be existing funnel entries. And as long as we can keep that balance or better, then I know that we're moving forward. So that's one of the things we were focusing on in Q1, just trying to get the sales team up to speed. Another one I love looking at is funnel in, funnel out. So we got a sales funnel, and we get a nice one here. We have new leads coming in the top of the funnel. We have deals coming out, or things getting lost. We lose deals or we win deals. You know, it's really easy to have a big fat funnel that makes you feel good and sleep well at night. You know what it is? Put your finger right here. Don't kill any deal ever. Just leave it all in there. And what's going to happen is you're going to add a few leads, not too many of them. They're just going to fill in, and that funnel's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're going to feel better and better and better until one day you realize they're all dead. And you're about to be fired in 3 weeks. So the key thing that I like looking at is not the size of the funnel. The size of the funnel is actually less important. What I'm more interested in is the flow rate. How many are coming in the top end? How many are dropping out the back end? And most importantly is how many are coming in the top end. So I'm looking at the top end, and I'm making sure when you fill up the top end, that allows people to give up on deals and focus on the good ones, not just try and close everything they have. This is really a classic problem in sales, and a CRM is great for this. The next thing you want to look at is what gets stuck at a particular stage. So something like Pipedrive, really good in that it'll even tell you have a, what do they call it, a rotten deal or a zombie, I forgot what they call it. But essentially if it spends too many days here in any one stage, it goes ahead and flags it as red and embarrasses you at the next meeting that you've got 4 deals that are just going no place. So again, your sales stages, this is really critical for that. So as you launch your CRM, start the practice of a weekly funnel review meeting. Everybody sits around and you review the funnel. Everybody says where they are, what's happened, and you have your dashboard metrics. Again, a big difference. Something like Salesforce is fantastic at building reports. You can build custom reports forever. And even non-technical people can do it really quick and easy. Most of the other CRMs have got a bunch of canned, built-in reports. If that's what you want, they're super sexy and great. If you want anything else, you're screwed. Ratio of good deals to bad deals is another sort of critical thing I look at. So again, if you know what the attributes are to your ideal customer profile, and you can label the deals as good and not good or medium. So basically what I typically do is say, look, everybody's allowed to keep at least 1 deal and not have to justify why they have that piece of junk in it. But if you've got 2 or 3, you need to start explaining why you've got low probability deals. So kind of my thinking on sales management is the biggest thing you have is you typically have salesmen who already have the skills. And they're willing to put in the energy, but there's 2 things that's happening. One is they're chasing the junk. They're spending energy on junk. They're spending energy on junk because it's standing in front of them, and it feels like the right thing to do. And number 2 is they often don't have an alternative. So what I like to do is try and pull all the junk away from them and force them to get some more leads in. And when they start to get more leads in and they have the less junk, they're focusing on the highly productive one and they're much more likely to succeed. So panic doesn't help sales guys. Panic usually just creates stalled deals that go nowhere, zombies. So, yeah, I'll try and wrap this up. Typical mistakes, too low value for users, has to help salesmen. All this stuff I'm telling you about, like number of emails and all that sort of thing, this is hygiene. This is like you need to back up your computer and run your antivirus. It's hygiene. You have to wash after you've been, when you've been to the hospital, you have to wash your hands. It's hygiene. You have to do these things to be successful. You also need to do things like sales gym. Sales gym is going out and making leads. Pull the sales guys together in a room, close the door for 2 hours, get them all a coffee and tell them to go dial for dollars and go get some leads. It has to happen. It's like going to the gym. Too many fields to maintain. Often you come up with a CRM and you have these grand ideas and you start creating all these fields that you had in your spreadsheets from before that you weren't maintaining. Every field on there, somebody, my case, if I'm deploying it, me, has to go through every single salesman that creates something and make sure they filled in the fields, at least at the beginning, right? Until you have the discipline and everybody's doing it. So the more fields means more risk that people stop filling it in. As soon as they get into the habit that it's okay to have a field not filled in, all bets are off and it falls apart. Data migration, it's never easy. Anybody who's an engineer knows about ETL and data migration. It's a mess. It's always imperfect. You want to avoid it, but it can be done. Not integrated with meetings and dashboards. That's also one of the key things. So as you do your CRM, make sure that you change how you manage sales guys as well. Over-customized. So just a general thing with any kind of major internal software tool. If you build it yourself, so d.labs, for example, said, oh, we know about databases. We do ERP. We'll make our own CRM just based on our existing tools. You know, they have a CRM that doesn't capture emails. Because at the time they were doing it, emails weren't a big part of the sales process. What is it going to take for them to add an email module? Massive work. Is it going to pay off? Nobody knows. Every month goes by, they don't have it. So you want to use an off-the-shelf solution. Don't over-customize it, because if you over-customize it, you can't stay on the upgrade path. Sales is moving fast right now. Yeah. Oh, shoot, I missed one big area, and I'll go back to, which is some of my favorite add-ins. This is one really key area. So right now, as I said, emails are the principal way in which you do your selling. Let me tell you what the pros are using now. So a couple products: Boomerang, SalesLoft, Outreach.io, Tout app. These are all just examples of the basic tool. But it basically does several things. It typically integrates with your Gmail or maybe has its own interface. But it does a couple things. One is you start to create templates for your emails. Now, why is that important? Because you're actually often sending half of your emails that you send every day, you've already sent that same email in the previous week to some form or another, right? Somebody sent an inbound inquiry and you did a response. Maybe there's one line different, but more or less it's the same. So you typically have templates. Templates save you time, but here's what's more important. The second thing it does is it tags every single email so that you know when it gets opened and you know if they clicked any links. Why is that important? Because what it does is it starts to keep tracks on various templates and tells you what percentage of the time did people open it, and tells you what percentage of the time did they click on the links. So if you've got your response to an inbound email and you only have 70%, and your buddy in the seat next to you has one that does 80%, guess what? Go copy his, right? And you only do this if you use templates and it's tracked. The second thing is, they typically have a live feed that tells you when the guy opened his email. When he opened his email is probably the best time to call him. because he's already thinking about you, and he's probably sitting at his desk. So, if you want to call him, you go ahead and do this. I can see you guys smiling, going, oh my God, I didn't realize that. Yeah, now I open my emails, I just mark as read instead of open them, because I'm scared to death I'm going to be called. When I was picking out all this stuff, I had to switch my email server because I'm so pounded by these guys that I had to go to Google, because Google was the only one strong enough to handle the kind of spam that started coming my way as I started dealing with these guys. The third thing it does, they decide, the boomerang is a good example. It says, when do you want to remind this guy again? And you say, well, I want to remind him again in 2 days. I want to remind him again in whatever. And then what happens is, it sits in the background, and if you don't get a reply from this guy, it pops up and says, here's your list of people you need to go remind again. And here's the email you sent him, so just go ahead and respond to this. In the really fancy ones, like the SalesLoft, Outreach.io, Close.io, and that sort of thing, you actually come up with a complete cadence for how you're going to get there. And you can say, on day 1, I'm going to send this template. On day 3, I'm going to send him a reminder. On day 4, I'm going to call him, and I'm going to send a LinkedIn message. On day 6, I'm going to send him another email with some funny story. On day 8, I'm going to do my Hail Mary. And day 12, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And they have things like, they call it like 7 by 21, which means I'm going to outreach to him 7 different ways over 21 days. Massive attacks, right? This is what the big boys are using now. And this is what an SDR does. But just generally, one of the biggest things, so Samantha has inbound inquiries. So I started using a tool like this. And one of the things we found is if we answered the email within the first couple hours, we got about a 75% response rate. Actually, I thought that was low, but we went up from a 50 to a 75 by just reducing the number of hours. Now remember, this is something they're going to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on, not something that they're just going to buy. You'd think they'd be able to wait a couple hours. No, they can't. Number 2. When we didn't get a response, and the next day we sent, still wanted to hear from you, is there a better time? Do you know what the response rate was? So if you got 75% the first time, what percentage of this 25% do you think responded on a second email? I would have assumed it'd be near 0. I mean, if they wanted to talk to us, they sent us an email, we responded, they didn't respond, they probably don't want to talk to us. Half. You cut this down by half by just sending a second email the second day. That little one step. In general, what's happening, especially in the United States, and those trends are moving here, everybody's getting so distracted, so busy, so whatever. Our good friends with burning needs, it takes 3 emails to punch through. How do we remember to do 3 emails? We don't. That's why these tools are so critical. By saying I'm going to go ahead and do this 2 days from now, and then when I send that one off, I say, let's go ahead and give him 5 days. Or it's done. By doing that, you get your 1, 2, and 3s guaranteed without overloading your head. You can handle way more people, and you have much more chance of getting response rates. I mean, just imagine if you could reach twice as often the people you're trying to reach. How would that change your sales? It's just massive, massive. That's why some bullshit, horrible product like SalesLoft can charge 100 euros a month, and it's worth it. There's other things like data feeds, lead sources, all that kind of stuff. There's not any clear winners, lots of different tools. I think I'll skip that and just kind of save a little time for discussion. With that, who's got questions? Yeah.
You checked lots of CRM systems. Which of these has the best mobile application?
None. You don't use them in mobile. You don't use a CRM on mobile.
I have a customer who wants just to have mobile CRM without so custom made for
Why?
that.
You can't read anything on it, right? The single biggest value of your CRM system is the ability to read through the notes. Salesforce has got one. It's there. I can't imagine it's going to be that much better than that product. But I never use it, right? I mean, if I'm going to walk into a meeting, I'm not going to read through 50 emails on a phone, especially when they end up in some nasty format in a CRM. This is, you know, one of the limitations of the CRM's email system is the emails aren't nice like that. So no, none. Salesforce would be the best, but that's somebody not thinking. Go get the Bluetooth dongle. I mean, go get the USB stick with the SIM card for their laptops and have them use it proper. What else? Yeah.
You mentioned that emails are all the rage now in the sales industry. Did you mean just for the first contact or all the way? Because eventually you want to call people or speak to them live, no?
You know, I was closing deals in San Francisco, and we would close them on one 45-minute in-person or telephone meeting and emails after that. We'd never talk again on the phone. And this is multi-million dollars. Right now in the US, you know, the number of people who, if you didn't schedule the time for the call, right now it's Zamenta. So Zamenta sells in the US, all the sales guys are in the US. In our sales rules, we're paying a reward for every meeting you set up, because basically the assumption is nobody ever talks to a customer without scheduling it. There's just no way the customer's ever going to answer the phone to anybody if it's not a scheduled appointment in his calendar. That's the assumption right now in the US. And I think that trend is moving here. There's just less and less people willing to answer the phone and be interrupted. But they'll take a million Slack messages and Skype messages and all that crap. I don't understand that. What else? Okay, that's it then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.